Today we are looking at a new commander that has been spoiled with the latest set announcements, which is the D&D Adventures of the Forgotten Realms, or whatever it is with that one. I'm not really the biggest D&D fan, so I can't say that I've got much of an affinity with this particular set, but the flavor does look very cool, so I'm just excited to see, I guess, what they're going to be doing with some of these IP crossovers in general. So this particular creature, this commander, I think is really sweet. Artifact pod on a dude, basically. So it's a 1 and a white legendary creature, Gnome Artificer, and it's a 2/2, so a bear. Oswold, Fiddlebender. And it has magical tinkering, which is this kind of like new thing that they're doing to give everything keywords in the set. It's pay 1 white and tap, sacrifice an artifact, search your library for an artifact card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrificed artifact's mana value. Put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Activate only as a sorcery. So if you are familiar with Birthing Pod or Vanifar or Eldritch Evolution or anything like that, that's essentially what this ability is templated as, except it is for artifacts. So super cool. You can do all kinds of weird and wonderful pod chains. The biggest, I guess, downside for this commander is that it is mono white, and while you can make some crazy pod chains in other formats, having access to additional colors, it's a bit tricky to do it just in mono white. You're not really getting any value out of it having access to white as such. So we are mostly using just colorless artifacts for this. So there's not a whole range of sort of white white creatures that happen to be artifacts as well. But nevertheless, we do have some very cool things that we can do to generate a whole bunch of value. So without further ado, let's check out the deck. So coming up first, we've got sort of a mishmash of our creatures, some Planeswalkers, some Sorceries, and some instants. We have Walking Ballista, Esper Sentinel, Aethersworn Canonist, Goldmere, Mirror Retriever, Burnished Heart, Filigree Familiar, Foundry Inspector, Heliod Suncrowned, Junk Diver, Scrap Trawler, Starnime Courser, Doira's Familiar, Leonin Abunas, Solemn Simulacrum, Tashar, Ancestor's Apostle, Razor Golem, Wormcoil Engine, and Meteor Golem for all of our creatures. So straight off the bat, you'll see that majority of these creatures are either, I guess, your light stacksy pieces, dorks, or they're part of a chain or a pod, I guess, loop that you can do. Scrap Trawler and Mirror Retriever, form part of a loop that is quite well known in terms of, it's not a new combo. It's just sort of recurring and continuously recurring Mirror Retriever and Scrap Trawler with additional pieces to basically, I guess, go semi-infinite. It's like your sorcery speed infinite with mana essentially. So it's not like you can do a sort of true infinite just off the bat with these two. You sort of do need a few extra pieces in place, but essentially you've got your Mirror Retriever, which reads, return another target artifact from your graveyard to your hand when it dies. So obviously if you pod into that, you get to take something else from your graveyard and put it into your hand. So then you can play that and then repod with your commander. And then you can play your Mirror Retriever again and repod with the commander again. So it's just continuously getting things out of your deck. With Scrap Trawler, it's whenever another artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, return it to your hand, target card, artifact card in your graveyard with lesser mana value. So this can sit on the field as a static effect and let you do it continuously with, each time effectively that you pod, you can go and get your old target from the pod. So if you have the Scrap Trawler on the field and you pod a 2-drop, maybe it's Mirror Retriever, something else, you can go and get a 1-drop from the graveyard. If you pod the 3-drop that you podded into, with say a Filigree Familiar or a Burnished Heart, you can then go and get the Mirror Retriever back from your graveyard and play that again for another pod or for another sort of like loop in that chain. So the two of those cards together make a really great, efficient loop to kind of, continuously cycle things out of your deck, get it onto the battlefield, and take things out of your graveyard and back to hand. So you're never going to sort of have issues with card advantage. So that's one of, I guess, the primary engines. You've probably spotted the Walking Ballista Heliod combo. So I would say this is not something that you want to be, rushing out and smashing. We don't have any protection whatsoever. So we want to make sure that we've got ways that we can sort of protect ourselves, with redundancy rather than with protection spells. So essentially you need to have everything set up in place if you want to try that Walking Ballista if you're playing at a table with counter magic. You've got your cost reducers with Joyra's Familiar, Starnheim, Corsa, and Foundry Inspector. All of those are really sweet. You'd also notice the Ugin, the Ineffable, really great cost reducer as well. We've avoided the Helm of Dominance, I think it's called, which is the symmetrical cost reducer for this particular build. I mostly just found that it's you're already a slow deck with, I guess, not a lot of ramp, not a lot of ability to kind of get ahead. So we don't really want to be giving our opponents free, acceleration in that respect. For Planeswalkers, we've got Karn, Ugin, and Ugin. Karn is really just about giving you a few extra tools. We're running both of the new Liquimetal, the new Liquimetal and the old Liquimetal for this deck. It's a nice little piece to sort of give you some land destruction or even just destruction of other permanents if we need to, or to just lock out your opponents from, being able to play artifacts themselves. I think Karn's really great. We don't really have a lot of exile targets or ways to exile creatures or artifacts. So that means that we can't really enjoy all of the benefits of Karn the way that we could with something like Oskia, but still a solid card nonetheless. And there's one in particular that we can use really efficiently if we happen to, set it up correctly with it's Ugin's Nexus. So Karn and Ugin's Nexus sort of gives us that infinite turns, provided that we continuously recast, the Ugin's Nexus. The reality is, though, because it is a down tick, we need to have 2 turns up, 1 turn down. So it's not like a true infinite turns, but it's definitely enough of an engine for you to be able to, get 3 or 4 turns if you need to, so that you can actually, fire things off and really build up a board state at that point. We've got the 3 sorceries, Savine's Reclamation, Open the Vaults, and All Is Dust. All Is Dust is as close to an asymmetrical board wipe as we're going to get. It just destroys, sacrifices all colored permanents. So essentially, you don't have many white, as you'll notice in the creatures, you don't have many white permanents. It's mostly colorless, so we might lose 1 or 2 pieces here or there, but for the most part we get to keep most of our board, which is colorless. Open the Vaults being just a way to get all of our artifacts back on the field. If things are being put in the bin by our pod loops, we can return them all to the battlefield at the same time. Savine's Reclamation, once again, just another way to take advantage of things being in the graveyard. Cast it for 3 from your hand and you get to return a 3-drop. Cast it for 5 from the graveyard and we get to get 2 3-drops. So that's awesome. Really, really solid. We've got a lot of leave the battlefield effects as well. So that's going to be really useful for us at the 3 slot. So those leave the battlefield effects with obviously Scrap Trawler, but we've got Junk Diver, Filigree Familiar. Both of those are great, in terms of leave the battlefield effects. We've got Burnished Heart is the sacrifice, so that's really good too. No issue getting that into the bin and then recurring it. And that's, I guess, pretty much it for those. For rounding things out, we've just got 3 path effects, essentially. So we've got Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshare, and Dispatch. It's really solid removal for 1. And then we've got the single Enlightened Tutor. By all means, you could put the Idyllic Tutor in as well, but realistically, the only things we want to get with the Enlightened Tutor that we can't get with our commander is the Heliod Sun Crowned, and then maybe a few other of the enchantments, which we'll look at the end. There's not very many overall. Moving forward into our regular artifacts, so we'll start to look at more pieces of the pod chain here. I've got a Mox Amber, Chromatic Sphere, Chromatic Star, Manifold Key, Sensei's Divining Top, Soul Ring, Voltaic Key, Arcane Signet, Ica Wellspring, Illusionist Braces, Liquid Metal Coating, Liquid Metal Torque, Magerite Stone, Mind Stone, Sword of the Animist. So that's all of our 0, 1s and 2s. So essentially, because our creature is a 2-drop, we can very often take advantage of the Mox Amber quite early. So I'm very much a fan of this. If your commander is a 0, 1 or a 2, I really like Mox Amber in the deck. Chromatic Sphere and Chromatic Star are just cool things that we can have access to when we're doing our pod loops and we've got our Mirror Retriever or our Scrap Trawler. Chromatic Sphere and Chromatic Star represent really useful artifacts that we can get back at the lower CMCs, mana values now, as they call it. So I think both of these are great because they cantrip, and you've got that filtering. If there is an instance where you've only got colorless, you can turn it into white. Manifold Key and Voltaic Key, these untap all of our artifacts, so they're obviously great, but when you combine them with Liquid Metal Coating or Liquid Metal Torque, we can actually turn our commander into an artifact and untap our commander with both of these effects so that we can get more enjoyment from that. So super, valuable. I would say that these, the keys and the liquid metals, they are probably not strong enough in a deck that doesn't also get a super useful value out of them generally. So we've obviously got a lot of artifacts that tap for mana, so the keys are really good. And the liquid metal coatings also give us a lot of things that we can tap and untap or target and either blow up or prevent them from tapping with Karn. There's a few other bits and pieces of synergy as well that you can see, turning things into artifacts so that we get additional benefit in other ways as well. The Illusionist Braces are really cool. So whenever an ability of an equipped creature is activated, if it isn't a mana ability, copy that ability, choose new targets for the copy. Essentially when you pod with Illusionist Braces, you get to go and get 2 things. So that's real awesome. Really sweet, because it'll still look at the costs of that initial activation. So you pod a 2-drop and you go and get 2 3-drops. That's very sweet. Ica Wellspring is an insane card in this type of list because you get an ETB and an LTB effect. So it's a very useful 1 into 2 pod as well. I would say the Illusionist Brace is also super useful, but if you need to sort of maintain that card advantage, Ica Wellspring is just great because it's going to draw you a card on the turn that it comes in and then draw you a card on the turn that you pod with it as well. So yeah, very valuable in that regards. Top, just a great card in an artifact deck, just a great card generally speaking, but a really useful card in an artifact deck. So you can use Search to set up the top of your deck for draws. Essentially, you've got all of those tools, with all of those cantrips. Looks like my computer's having a fit. That's okay. Let's see if we can just fix that. Right, it looks like we're not having music for the rest of the video. Never mind then. Moving forward, we've got Magerite Stone, untap target creature that has an activated ability, such as another way to untap your commander. We've got Mind Stone, Mana Rock, Sword of the Animist, just a way to pull out basic lands, which we have a lot of in the deck. Usually you can just equip this to something, a small dude, and just get a little bit of extra value from it before you either pod it away or essentially pod the sword itself, because 2-drops into 3-drops are very relevant. The sword also represents something that can potentially eat up a removal spell. Typically I think that people get a bit worried when it's color combinations that aren't particularly good at ramping start to ramp really quickly. They get a bit worried. So the sword, I've found in the past in other decks, whenever it's not green, people want to get rid of that very quickly. So moving on to 3-drops, we've got Archaeomancer's Map, which is a ramp spell. Basalt Monolith, another ramp that we're going to untap with keys, all of that kind of stuff. We've got Cloud Key, it's more acceleration. mimic that. So this kind of serves two purposes. You can use it to create your ETB, LTB effects with your own, your own creatures, but it's also just a catch-all for your opponent's creatures as well. We have Rings of Brighthearth. You can use it to double up on those pods. You can use it to double up on the untaps with Basalt Monolith, so you can tap, untap, and get infinite mana. Really, really sweet card in general. It's great just as a Basalt Brighthearth combo, but with all of the things that we can be doubling up in this deck, it's super, super relevant. We've got Staff of Domination. This is kind of how we get to our win condition. Once we go through the pod and have access to, unlimited untaps with Staff of Domination. So the way that we get infinite white mana with this deck, I'll reveal, in a little bit. If you have spotted it already, props to you. But essentially, we're going to be using the Basalt Monolith Rings of Brighthearth combo to make infinite colorless, and then we're going to be filtering that through using a different piece. So Staff of Dom, once we have that infinite white, we don't even need the infinite white, but once we have the infinite mana, we can be tapping, untapping, and drawing our deck and gaining infinite life. So really sweet there. 1000-Year Elixir, this is just haste for all of our activated abilities. Umbral Mantle is just an untap effect that also is semi-relevant. There may just be a situation where you can just tap, untap, where you're not infinite mana, but you've got maybe 15 mana or something like that. And you just want to turn your commander into a 22/22 and alpha strike someone, when their guard's down. Really sweet, ability there, because each time you untap it, it gets bigger and bigger. Clock of Omens, tap 2 untapped artifacts you control, untap target artifact. So it's another, mini synergy with the liquid metal coatings for a way to untap your commander if you give it if you make it an artifact as well. But it's also just a good way to gain additional mana from things that don't necessarily generate you mana. So if you tap the 2 untapped artifacts to untap your Basalt Monolith, maybe you're tapping a Ica Wellspring and a top that you're not planning on sensing with that turn. Krark-Clan Ironworks, this is just an extension piece, so it's obviously an insane card because it's a sack outlet that generates you mana and it lets you sack artifacts, so really cool way to kind of just get a little bit further ahead. It's also in no way mission critical that we resolve this, so sometimes, if you're playing in a control heavy deck or a control heavy pod or people have lots of removal, this is like a kill on sight card that isn't really relevant for our deck, but people will kill on sight still. So yeah, really awesome for that. We've got Lithiform Engine. This is just another way to get additional activated abilities from the pod. We can copy target permanents. We don't really have that many instants of sorceries, so we're not too worried about that. But really sweet, another Rings of Brighthearth really. We've got Mystic Forge, so it is just a way to play artifacts off the top of your deck, really sweet there. But also you can, fix the top card of your deck, and you've got that weird top interaction where you can draw your whole deck if you have infinite mana, because you can just put the top back on your top of your library, play it off the top for 1, and sort of ad nauseum. Thran Dynamo, Mana Rock, useful in this kind of deck. Really good as it's a temporary piece of ramp because you'll pot into your 5-drops, which are much more relevant. Unwinding Clock, it's a Seedborn Muse in this deck. Forsaken Monument is one of the next big pieces. Whenever you tap a permanent for colorless, add an additional colorless, so that's really sweet. You get to gain lots of life from casting colorless spells, and colorless creatures you control get +2/+2. Not super relevant, but can be semi-useful. Occasionally you'll have this on the battlefield. You'll have infinite mana, but you don't have a way of casting your Walking Ballista, but you can get it onto the battlefield, and because it's not a 0/0, it doesn't die immediately. It will come onto the battlefield with 0 counters, and then you can essentially, add counters to it with your colorless mana and then kill people that way. Gilded Lotus, another ramp spell. Ugin's Nexus, so this is a really sweet card to pod, because you have it on the battlefield, then you pot it, it goes into the graveyard, it exiles, and you get an extra turn. And you know, you could potentially do that with an untap and a tap. In one turn, it comes onto the battlefield and it's exiled all in one go. So really sweet in that regards. Planar Bridge, just another. Essentially, there was a really small amount of 6-drops that I thought were particularly useful. You've got Razor Golem, Wormcoil Engine, and Planar Bridge being the only really useful 6-drops that I could muster up, because we want to get to 7, which is Chromatic Orrery, which is our 7-drop and probably one of the most useful cards in the deck. You may spend mana as though it was mana of any color. Add 5 colorless. So this is how we can both get our, you know, there's plenty of other mana filters. You know, you got Prismite is another mana filter, definitely worth consideration. Chromatic Orrery I like because it also gives us our draw outlet if we have, you know, a lot of ways to, if we have, you know, infinite mana, and this gives us another go at drawing, and we could potentially be untapping and things like that as well. The last artifact for the list is Darksteel Forge. Just makes things indestructible. So Darksteel Forge plus your Leonin Abunus is pretty much indestructible and hexproof for everything in your deck. So that's really sweet, obviously. You know, you're always happy about having that situation because it's basically just a Cyclonic Rift that's going to be able to deal with you at that point. So yeah, very cool. Okay, and rounding out the last pieces of the deck, we have Ancient Den, Blast Zone, Buried Ruin, Inventor's Fair, Urza's Saga, War Room. Those are our non-basic lands. I think that the War Room's really cool because it's, you know, we're only paying 1 life each time to draw a card. Inventor's Fair and Buried Ruin should be a no-brainer. Blast Zone for, you know, having a little bit of extra control of the field. Ancient Den is great. Artifact lands are awesome in artifact decks. And then a whole bunch of planes. The only enchantments we've got are Land Tax, Monologue Tax, and Smothering Tithe. So it's just tax effects and I guess, you know, getting those additional lands up front. So that is the list. Realistically, this deck is all about your commander, so you want to make sure that you've got as much of an opportunity to take, you know, those pod turns and untaps as you can. I guess probably one of the bigger weaknesses for this type of deck is that it is extremely commander-centric. You don't really have ways of, I guess, going around that. So if someone like resolves a Drannith Magistrate before you get to play your commander, you know, you're in a bit of a pickle until you get one of those removal spells. And people, as they play versus this kind of commander, will realize that, okay, yeah, I've got to deal with this. I would say that the Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves are more than useful for this kind of list. I probably would say if you're wanting to look for things to swap those for, you know, you could probably cut the Sword of the Animist or something like that, maybe even the Leonin Abunus. Because realistically, it's just about protecting those. I've always found that those particular items, so the Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves in this, it's really it's like a high variance card, so it's either perfect or almost irrelevant. And so I try and avoid those kinds of, you know, increased variance kind of cards in the list. Yeah, I guess the only other things we haven't really spoken about much is Tashar is a really sweet card in this. We've got heaps and heaps of artifacts, so we can really recur a lot of things, you know, when we are having Tashar on the battlefield. And realistically, I think this list is really cool, but I'm not sure if it even takes the #1 spot for a mono-white artifact deck. I think maybe Tashar's just probably got a little bit more of an engine to it, and that if you wanted to, you could probably swap these two, you know, positions in the deck. So playing this as a Tashar deck and having the Oswold in the 99, I think is more than reasonable, you know, as an alternative. I also think Lashiel is probably not quite as good as Oswald, but it certainly makes it an interesting, you know, mono-white artifact deck as well. So that's really the entirety of the deck. Thank you so much for checking out the video and for sticking around to the end. I would really love any subs and any thumbs ups and shares that people, if they enjoy it. Yeah, very much appreciate that. So thanks so much for checking out the video, and we'll speak soon.